What if a novel destroyed your belief in the very possibility that language can contain the definitive truth, yet, by a method of writing contradictions, arrived at a deeper truth? Better than food, man. Today is Thomas the Obscure by the French author Maurice Blanchot, originally published in 1941. This was a very kind gift from my friend Alex. Thanks a bunch, man. I really appreciate it. Thomas the Obscure is a philosophical experimental novel. Truly one of the strangest books I've encountered. A heavy interrogation of life and death, being and non-being. It was Maurice Blanchot's first novel, and it's the first book of his I've read. In theory. I have read it, and it's as if I have not read it. To say I understood it is a lie. To say that I understood part of it feels like a lie. But to say that I didn't understand any of it also feels like a lie. It does not seem like a book meant to be understood so much as experienced. I mean, it's called Thomas the Obscure, not Thomas the Obvious. It's a short book, but the complexity of the lines combined with the enormous paragraphs make it a dense and challenging read. Maurice Blanchot is a French author, critic, and philosopher who influenced postmodern philosophers, including Jacques Derrida, and his approach of philosophical deconstruction, which questioned the idea that language contains definitive truth. Thomas the Obscure seems to have been a precursor for Derrida's approach. Both Blanchot and Derrida were highly influenced by the philosophy of Martin Heidegger, author of Being and Time, which I've read. It's a good one. You should check it out. It's a light read. It'll only take you 10 years. I've heard Blanchot's name for quite a while, having been a fan of Georges Bataille, and having read Georges Bataille's biography, Georges Bataille, an Intellectual Biography, by the brilliant French author Michel Syria, which discusses Bataille and Blanchot's friendship and similarity. I've reviewed that biography as well as Michel Syria's very compelling book, Dead End. I highly recommend both. There's also a great documentary on Blanchot from the series Un siècle d'écrivain, linked below, directed by Hugo Santiago, who, interestingly, was once an assistant director for Robert Bresson, in which Michel Syria discusses Bataille and Blanchot's meeting, their mutual inspiration, and mentions that Bataille was having conversations with Blanchot while writing his book Inner Experience, which I've also read, in theory. It's a good one. Both Bataille and Blanchot deal with the themes of death and the limits of thought and experience. In that documentary, Syria gives an insightful piece of information about the difference between Bataille and Blanchot. This is a quote from Syria in the documentary. According to Bataille, the experience is death. Blanchot suggests, on the contrary, that the experience is the process of dying, that death is precisely what does not come to us, what cannot possibly be experienced. Very interesting difference, no? And Syria identifies this idea in a couple of Blanchot's books, but it's certainly present in Thomas the Obscure as well. In the same documentary, the dance choreographer Daniel Dobels had the same reaction to Thomas the Obscure that I did, having felt like he never read it. Georges Bataille wrote the following: I believe that truth has only one face, that of a violent contradiction, and that sets the tone for Blanchot's novel. So I'll give you a summary of the book. The book is about a man named Thomas and a woman named Anne who somehow know each other, and their ongoing mental interrogations with themselves concerning life and death, being and non-being. That's about as much as I can tell you with any certainty, as the entire book throws any notion of certainty into the flames. I finally gave up on any notion of a conclusive interpretation and just allowed myself to drift. Bataille also wrote the following: I myself am war. So is Thomas. I'm reporting back from the front of a war of thought within a man named Thomas, and the result appears to be an ecstatic stalemate. Thomas the Obscure is like a strange philosophical loose narrative prose poem, an attempt to think the unthinkable, the impossible, to think beyond thought, to push it as far as it can go and further, in search, it seems, of a kind of freedom. The character Thomas seems to embody his non-existence as a means of achieving existence. If that makes sense. Right? Right. This is demonstrated with a stunningly paradoxical form of writing. Many sentences present an idea thwarted, reversed, or challenged, so that you're so disoriented the entire time, it's impossible to get your footing conceptually. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. To give you an idea, here's a quote from the book. He saw nothing, and far from being distressed, he made this absence of vision the culmination of his sight. I imagine it's not an uncommon experience to feel that one is going insane while reading it. There is absolutely nothing to hold on to, just an exploration of the chaotic process of consciousness. What in God's name is true? Nothing. Not even nothing! Past the nothingness of nothingness. It's a tremendous mindfuck. Blanchot's book forces us to consider not only the possibilities of language, but also the impossibility of language. Yet another one of its possibilities. Blanchot challenged himself to describe that which defies description. And he succeeded? Blanchot's writing illuminates unfamiliar subterranean mental spaces like poetry, communicating wildly complex individual states of being, feeling, and thought. Or perhaps it communicates the futility of communicating them using language. These states are so elusive and the idea is so ephemeral, it's almost as if you read the sentence once, and then it changes when you read it again. The meaning shifts. The central core of the words is non-existent. This was the idea of postmodernism, right? No single truth. No single interpretation. That's what the idea in the book is, and that's how the text functions. The translator Robert Lamberton, in a text after the novel entitled Thomas and the Possibility of Translation, suggests that Blanchot was inspired by the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who spoke in short paradoxical aphorisms, and who famously wrote, via Plato, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man." That influence is certainly apparent. To give a nod to Heraclitus, reading Thomas the Obscure is like trying to grab a particular handful of water in the ocean. Both Heidegger and Bataille were inspired by Heraclitus as well. He really made an impact. I'm seeing his name everywhere these days. There are passages in Thomas the Obscure that distinctly remind me of Georges Bataille's Story of the Eye, not in the eroticism, but in the narrator's brief existential reflections. In Thomas the Obscure, rote actions take on an alien quality. Normal associations with life and relationships disintegrate. Existence becomes overwhelming and foreign. Fact, truth, and comprehension become impossible. In this manner, it has a slightly similar flavor to Camus' The Stranger. Blanchot and Camus knew each other. Yet in this impossibility of discerning the truth, there is something in Blanchot's writing that distinctly feels like the truth. But that truth is one of ontological chaos. As in the real truth is that being itself is unfathomable, unknowable. Consciousness is immense and all opposites, all things, all at once. How the hell do you write that? Well, voila. Definitive interpretation is doomed, yet it's not obnoxious. It's beautiful. It may be the most ambiguous thing I've ever read in my life. Blanchot described the book as a récit, which means narrative in French, but Blanchot wrote the following explanation. The récit is not the narration of an event, but the event itself, the approach to that event, the place where that event is made to happen. An event which is yet to come and through whose power of attraction the récit can come into being too. And that may sound pretentious, but I don't think it is. When you read this thing, man, it is ghostly, phantasmagoric, alive, right? Static as these words are, they shift and move when you read them. Though the sentences are fixed in place, you can sense the undulating process as you read it. Like the character Thomas, they're dead but still living. Spooky. It is. It's a spooky book. It's a very, very odd experience. Not like any other book I've ever read. Not like any other reading experience I've had. It's so weird and enjoyable, as if you're interacting with a living animal instead of a dead object. The book truly has life. And death. I wrote down that initial idea for this review, that the book is kind of alive, having just begun the book, and coincidentally, there's a scene with Thomas reading a book wherein the book sort of comes to life, though that's a highly reductive description of the scene. But it's near the beginning. You should check it out. It's as though the book were, a living experience, an event, like Blanchot said, occurring because you read it. You have to experience it for yourself. You have to make it come alive, right? I think you'll see what I mean. Dramatic lighting change. Sometimes the book has the quality of an existential horror story, a man reckoning with his own death, inhabiting some state of consciousness between life and death, but neither. He exists in this kind of half-world, right? The Twilight Zone. He exists in this space of perpetually crossing over from life to death and back. It's this very odd dynamic that he embodies. That's what the whole book is about. Living and dying, being and non-being. In a video about Blanchot linked below, the philosopher Christopher Finsk discusses the problem of placing Blanchot in the conceptual landscape of theory. To use a Bataillean term, he seemed to have been kind of heterogeneous. Out there among the out there. A real individual. Regarding theoretical works by philosophers such as Lacan and Deleuze, as he mentions, Finsk, in the video, says the following. They're not positions, and if you read them as positions, you actually reduce them. Position, as in taking a position on something. A stance. Though Finsk was discussing Blanchot's later writings, this helped me understand Thomas the Obscure. It seems as though the life of Blanchot's novel, the livingness of it, right, is inseparable from its impenetrability. It's part of the whole process, right? That's what makes it living. It's part of the whole thing, right? This weird machine. In that it requires this indiscernible mystery to operate as a dynamic process unfolding in front of you. It's the very opposite of a Hemingway novel, which is sort of dead on the page in its coherent statement, right? Hemingway, of course, is anything but dead on the page, but you get the idea. This is a very different kind of novel, like the polar opposite on the spectrum. Hemingway is all about statements, declarations, facts, truth. Blanchot is about the real truth, right? It's as if to make a definitive declaration would nullify the process, the event that Blanchot says the book is. Because the essence of the book is the process wherein declaration is impossible. It is entirely about the ambiguity of life, of being. It communicates the unknowability of existence and non-existence, of life and death, as well as the unknowability of other people, and, it seems, of language. The following line from the book is from the section focusing on the experience of Anne. He did not deceive her, and yet she was deceived by him. Treachery revolved about them, so much the more terrible because it was she who was betraying him, and she was deceiving herself at the same time with no hope of putting an end to this aberration since, not knowing who he was, she always found someone else beside her. Thomas the Obscure, right? Yeah, the unknowability of everything, right? Again, this is demonstrated with the constant reversals of meaning within the text. The book seems to be asking what is truly life and truly death. How separate are they? How do we relate to them? How do they mix inside of us? The following line in the book is from Thomas. I feel myself dead. No. I feel myself living, infinitely more dead than dead. I discover my being in the vertiginous abyss where it is not, an absence where it sets itself like a god. I am not, and I endure. It's a hell of a line. I am not, and I endure. That line reminds me of one of E.M. Chiron's aphorisms from his great collection of aphorisms, The Trouble with Being Born. And that aphorism is, what do you do from morning to night? I endure myself. Blanchot shows us that identity, like language, has a weak foundation. Language is a kind of identity is a kind of language, and these constructions of ours are flimsy, at best. It's also a very tragic book, as one character takes the journey to the end of life, the actual end of life, and undergoes a complex metamorphosis along the way, and her inner experience is explored. It's a really depressing portion of the narrative. It's intricate and interesting, but the feeling of solitude is overwhelming. It's actually quite depressing. It's very dark, and it's a fair warning. But Blanchot is getting at something intense here. He's communicating the impossibility of the communication of inner experience using language, through a demonstration of two opposites being correct, yet somehow to some extent recognizably true, as they cancel each other out in the process, right? And thus collapse into themselves, dissolving this dissolution that reflects the truth of life. Blanchot's exploration of death is a method of exploring our relationship to life and being itself, in this strange relationship of opposites. The book is a game, but a very serious game. He is somehow communicating the experience, dying as living, living as dying. The result is bewildering to see on the page. You'll see this process, this cycle, repeated over and over and over. It's conceptually exhausting, yet kind of enthralling to see just how much sense can be made from nonsense. Where is Blanchot taking us? On one of the darkest metaphysical journeys ever written, to the limits of thought and beyond, to a place that is profoundly somewhere and yet ironically nowhere, to non-existence as a means of discovering one's existence. I am not and I endure, right? Better than food. 4 out of 5 coffees. I highly recommend it. It's just to appreciate the innovative style of a profoundly unique author. Just to see what he does, you know? So what did I dislike? I could say I was frustrated by the demanding nature of the text, but it's my own shortcomings as a reader, so it's not a fair criticism. And that's also what I really like about it, you know? It's a total challenge. It doesn't give you anything. I'd say it'll be a much easier read if you're steeped in continental philosophy and used to reading theory. The slower you can read this book, the more you're going to get out of it. At the same time, though, having read it fast, the experience was a riveting onslaught of tempestuous ideas, right? So it's you know, there are pros and cons to both. Yeah, reading it fast is just like, I don't know whether I'm alive or dead. It's not that these words come to not have meaning, but something like the depth of their meaning is so profound it begins to break apart traditional notions of the words themselves. That's what he's doing with language. He's drilling into the core of their meaning and through them. It's a brilliant demonstration of overthinking something, but the intellectual rigor is unparalleled. In the mind of Blanchot, thought seems infinite. This is particularly true when Thomas begins to discover that he is both dead and alive, though that's a severe reduction of his journey of discovery. So is it nonsense? Yes, absolutely. In other words, the perfect representation of life and death. It's impossible to say anything conclusive about it. I've said something and ended up saying nothing, which seems entirely appropriate. So who should read it? If you're into Georges Bataille, Heraclitus, E.M. Chiron, Samuel Beckett, and Martin Heidegger, definitely check this out. And also if you're into post-structuralism, you know, Foucault, Derrida, Lacan, Deleuze, I think you'll love it. And with that, coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for stopping by and watching the show. I take all the names of the patrons who are financially supporting the show on Patreon and I place their names in this mason jar. And for every review, I pull out a name. And every time I pull out, I send a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly, and the coffee is delicious. Currently it's from Brazil. If you would like to get in on that and help support the show, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. You can click on the link below or go to patreon.com/booksabedandthefood, and the tiers start at $5 per video. I make about 3 to 4 videos a month. Please don't forget to set a monthly limit if you're on a budget. Though if you do set a limit, please allow for at least 3 monthly charges in order to get the video call perk. That's for the $10 per video plus tiers. In addition, for becoming a paid patron, you'll get access to all this cool stuff. And international shipping is included, however unfortunately I can't send coffee to the UAE or Qatar. Thank you very much to all my patrons for helping me keep this project going. I really appreciate it. Couldn't do it without you, and best of luck. Okay, here we go. Caden S. Thank you very much, Caden. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive Thomas the Obscure by Maurice Blanchot, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly, and I hope you love both. Cheers. Please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and always remember, die reading. Alright. Great to see you as always. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.